What were your parents like? And I mean, what were they like together? Did they always get along? Or were there predictable areas of conversation and conflict that made you and your siblings duck for cover? I've heard from several marriage and family therapists who have spent a career dealing with marital conflict, and they tell me that something has recently shifted. In years past, the most frequent areas of marital discord that needed third-party mediation were money, sex, and how to raise the kids. What do you think is the thorniest marital issue today? Politics. Carrie Nieuwhof writes, "You don't need to be anything more than a casual observer of American and Western culture to know that something significant is happening. The current political division is as bad as it's been in a long time. You and I experience it every day as we watch or avoid watching the news, as we read or avoid reading the newspapers or news feeds, as we engage or avoid engaging in the political debates that rage around us. And there's no point in pretending that we can hold ourselves completely aloof from such conflict. It has seeped into our communities, our families, our friendships, even our marriages. So what do we do?" So there is this national leader who seems to regularly lose his temper, to rage as if in torment, to strike out at others in speech and actions that seem completely irrational and irresponsible, as if he were possessed by some evil spirit. You know who I'm talking about. King Saul from the Old Testament reading this morning. You know, one of those antiquated passages that seem totally irrelevant to modern times and situations. Or maybe not. Perhaps you and I understand what was going on in Israel, the huge waves of discord stirred up by such behavior and sent flooding over to the rest of the nation. The situation as posed by our biblical writers and editors comes from their distinctively theocentric point of view. They believe the cause of all of this was God. God's Spirit, which used to reside on Saul, was withdrawn due to Saul's straying from the way of God. And in its place has come an evil spirit, an ill humor that grips Saul like a fever and torments him, and through him the whole nation. But even from this theocentric perspective, the situation doesn't simply doom the nation to never-ending discord and dis-ease. There is something that can be done. There is a source of hope and life and healing that can ease the king's affliction and heal the nation's ills. And what is this source? Some of you will be particularly glad to hear the answer. Music. Music. Music will ease the king's soul. Music will heal the nation's sickness. Music has charms to soothe the savage beast, William Congreve wrote. Music is the art of the prophets, the only art that can calm the agitations of the soul, Martin Luther wrote. Music is probably the only real magic I have encountered in my life. It moves, it heals, it communicates, and does all these incredible things. So wrote Tom Petty. Finally, my favorite quote about music, this one from Albert Schweitzer. "There are two means of refuge from the miseries of life: music and cats." But of course, music only does all these wondrous healing things if it comes from the hands and soul of a musician. And isn't it interesting that the future king of Israel, young David, a humble shepherd, is so renowned for his musical gifts that one of Saul's servants quickly speaks up in court. "I have seen a son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite, who is skilled at playing." And so David is immediately sent for, plucked out of the fields where he is tending the sheep. He comes into the royal court, puts hand to string and presumably voice to melody, And we are told Saul would be relieved and feel better, and the evil spirit would depart from him. This is soulful work, this music making. That's what this passage reminds us. And more than that, it's nation healing work, hope restoring, spirit renewing. This kind of work is so important that it isn't left to mere entertainers, to strolling players and touring minstrels. It's the work of David, the future king of Israel. The writer of 1 Peter could have been talking to musical artists when he wrote, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." This is our work. Music making to ease the evil spirits of our time, to comfort the afflictions of our crazy culture, to quiet the conflict of angry, shouting voices. And by us, I mean us Christians, us folks in the choir of Jesus Christ, the church. This is from Carrie Nieuwhof again. No church can pretend we're not living in an age of heightened tension. So how do we respond to the situation we're in? Well, some in our culture believe the church is part of the problem. I believe it's key to the solution. Jesus is the love we keep missing as human beings. So how does the church better function as part of the solution rather than as part of the problem in these crazy times? Among the answers Nieuwhof provides is this one: the church is the place to foster conversation in a culture that shouts. The church is a place to foster conversation in a culture that shouts. Listen, I deeply appreciate social media and the opportunities that it's given me to reach out to friends and family in a new way. I also am delighted that social media provides everyone with a platform, an opportunity to share their voice. The problem is that so many people use this platform to shout, to scream, rather than to really communicate. Pastor Nieuwhof writes, this translates into real life too. Conversations seem to be devolving into an exchange of monologues between two people who don't seem terribly interested in listening to each other. People appear to be talking at each other rather than talking with each other. That's not conversation. What's missing in our culture today is a capacity to listen. What's missing is thoughtfulness, self-restraint, humility, kindness, openness. That's what makes for the music of genuine conversation. And when was the last time you had something like that, a genuine conversation with someone who didn't share your background, assumptions, and values? Without genuine listening, without real openness, the kind of music that makes for harmonious living is lost. And in its place is nothing but noise, angry, shouting, ignorant noise. Jonathan Katz does an exercise with men and women to illustrate how little we truly hear and understand each other's experience. I draw a line down the middle of a chalkboard, he writes, sketching a male symbol on one side and a female symbol on the other. Then I ask just the men, what steps do you guys take on a daily basis to prevent yourselves from being sexually assaulted? At first there's a kind of awkward silence as the men try to figure out if they've been asked a trick question. The silence gives way to a smattering of nervous laughter. Occasionally, a young guy will raise his hand and say, I stay out of prison. This is typically followed by another moment of laughter before somebody finally raises his hand and soberly states, "Nothing. I don't think about it." Then I ask the women the same question. What steps do you take on a daily basis to prevent yourselves from being sexually assaulted? Women throughout the audience immediately start raising their hands as the men sit in stunned silence. The women recount safety precautions they take as part of their daily routine. Here are some of their answers. Hold my keys as a potential weapon. Look in the back seat of the car before getting in. Carry a cell phone. Don't go jogging at night. Lock all the windows when I sleep, even on hot summer nights. Be careful not to drink too much. Don't put my drink down and come back to it. Make sure I see my drink being poured. Own a big dog. Carry mace or pepper spray. Have an unlisted phone number. Have a man's voice on my answering machine. Park in well-lit areas. Don't use parking garages. Don't get on elevators with only one man or with a group of men. Vary my route home from work. Watch what I wear. Don't use highway rest areas. Use a home alarm system. Don't wear headphones when jogging. Avoid forests or wooded areas, even in the daytime. Don't take a first-floor apartment. Go out in groups. Own a firearm. Meet men on first dates in public areas. Make sure to have a car or cab fare. Don't make eye contact with men on the street. I don't know about you, but Jonathan Catt's exercise hits me right between my eyes. As a straight male, it reminds me both of my incredible privilege and my incredible ignorance. And it should remind all of us that a real and genuine conversation, a listening to and sharing of our particular experience and perspective, is the only real place that healing can begin. In the aftermath of the recent sexual harassment scandals at Fox News and in Hollywood, among politicians on the right and the left, from the office next door to the highest office in the land, isn't it time for a real conversation? Isn't it time for all the voices to be heard? For the powerful to really listen, and the ignorant shouting to cease, the shouting that has drowned out the hope for healing. And this is only one of many opportunities for the healing power of conversation to deliver us from the ignorant noise of our times. Issues of race, gender identity, immigration and national status, of labor and life, of political ideology and faith experience, all of these need real conversation for the differences between us to be bridged. Remember, there is no common good without common ground. And how can we find that common ground if we do not listen? How do we find it if we do not speak with the particular music of our own experience? So that's the challenge to us, fellow healers of our crazy, bedeviled culture. Your most significant contribution to healing the world will not be in what you think, but in what you do. And it's not just about finding diverse news sources. It's more intimate than that. How diverse is your dinner table? Do you only ever have people over to your house who look like you? Who share your values? Or are you engaging people who are different in real conversation? When was the last time you listened as much as you spoke? How long has it been since you were moved and touched by the testimony of someone who is truly different than you are? Let the healing music of conversation begin with us, in our church, in our neighborhoods, in our offices, in our homes. If we do not listen, how can others be heard? If we do not speak, how can others be moved?